Welcome everyone and welcome to our webinar today, all about circadian rhythms. This is a really interesting area of research and still, I would say, being researched and studied and being revised in the medical literature. But there's certainly a huge amount of research now about how important getting your circadian rhythm right is for your overall health. And, with lockdown, changes in routine, different working environments and so on, it may well be that you have noticed that, sleep patterns are disrupted, or maybe you're struggling to wake up at the same time every day. Or you may have found that your sort of going to bed routine has altered as well. And these can all have quite dramatic impacts on our overall health. So that's what we're going to look at today. Chris is here, so if you've got any questions, just post them in the chat box in the Facebook page, and we will get to questions at the end as well. So what I want to do is just first of all really just cover what a circadian rhythm is and why that is important for our health and what sort of things make it go out of sync. And then we'll have a look at some dietary and lifestyle strategies that can help to get it back into sync. And right at the end as well, I will just touch on a few sleep supplements, slightly separate from circadian rhythm, but just a few sleep supplements that I have found to be quite useful. So let's have a look at our circadian rhythm. And I think this diagram is really useful because what it's really highlighting is that at different times in the day, different body processes and systems are either very active or, quite dormant in a sense. And our circadian rhythm is very much our 24-hour change in our physiology and metabolism, and that's really important if you're thinking about your weight, that allows us to effectively, just like many other animals, predict the availability of food and light. And without that proper circadian rhythm, your body processes go completely out of sync. And what's more interesting is that what they have found is that different organs are communicating with each other so that they all function in symphony. So it's a bit like an orchestra. And we have a master conductor that helps to keep all our organs, all the cells in beat. And when those organs are working together, communicating together, and are keeping the same rhythm, our body functions at its optimal. So we need to keep that beat. And what coordinates that is our master clock, and that's in our hypothalamus. And that really gives us an indication of, okay, if our master clock is in our hypothalamus, and actually it's very near our optic nerve, how do we make sure that that in particular is helping everything else come into the right beat at the right time? And remember that different things happen at different times of the day for our body, and men and women are slightly different as well. And there are daily rhythms to our immune system, to our metabolism, to our reproductive system, and our mood as well. Interestingly, with men, testosterone is higher in the morning. With women, estrogen production is higher. Now, from a weight perspective and a blood sugar perspective, insulin has its own time of day. So the pancreas effectively goes to sleep about 8 o'clock at night. And that is one of the reasons why we really stress time-restricted eating, no late night snacking. Because if you are going to eat much later than that, that is really stressing your pancreas when it doesn't particularly want to balance blood sugar and stabilize it because it doesn't want to be producing anything. And what's also interesting is that things like adiponectin, which is a hormone which we produce from our fat tissue and is really important for fat burning, works in synchrony with the pancreas. So, of course, if the pancreas is going to sleep and then we start feeding with lots of food at that point, we're not going to start fat burning. If anything, we're going to store more fat. And also, there is evidence to suggest that we are programmed, and there is a lot of debate about this one, to exercise at certain times of the day. And I would say that we'll come on to that, but that will vary from one person to another. There's still a lot of emerging research on that. But when we look at our master clock, which sits in the hypothalamus near our optic nerve, it's called the suprachiasmatic nucleus. And the sitting next to the optic nerve is really important because it detects light. So our light and dark exposure is absolutely critical for it to work well. And every day we need to reset it. So what happens is, if we are suddenly giving our brain and our body lots of light late at night, then that is going to shift our clock, and we are not going to have a quality sleep. We're not going to produce the melatonin, and then the sync for the next day gets really disrupted. Now, interestingly, for people of all ages, women of all ages, it's also influenced by estrogen. Estrogen levels can have quite a significant effect on the timing and the functioning of our master clock. So as levels change, which could change during a cycle, but also, of course, if you're on medications that might, influence estrogen, so I'm thinking contraceptive pill, HRT, and or if we're going through menopause and our levels start really falling, that will affect the clock and it will cause our timing to drift. And there's been studies which suggest that, for women, that can shift through our cycle by 5-6 minutes. Now, that might not seem a lot, but it can have quite a significant effect on how we feel and our sleep quality as well. Now, the interesting thing is, it's that suprachiasmatic nucleus that is controlling all the other clocks in our body. And we have clocks everywhere. We have clocks in our brain, in our heart, in our arteries, in our liver, pancreas, we mentioned, our gut, ovaries, bone, all of them. And these peripheral clocks will respond not only to that master signaling, but also meal timing. And this is one of the big ways that we can influence the functioning of all those organs and help to reset our master clock. And so the other thing to mention is that what interacts with this is our microbiome. Our microbiome has its own clock as well. So if you have got imbalances in your gut, if you've got, IBS, dysbiosis, changes in your gut flora, that in itself could have quite a significant effect on your circadian rhythm. So these are some of the things that can also disrupt our circadian rhythm. Some of them are pretty obvious. So nocturnal light exposure. Now, by that I mean, and I'm thinking here all of us on electronics late at night, which will block melatonin, that could have quite an impact on your circadian rhythm. Improper meal timing. So where you are eating very late at night, poor interrupted sleep, which could be for a whole range of reasons, but that in itself will then disrupt your circadian rhythm and have a knock-on effect the next day. Stress, traveling across different time zones, probably not relevant at the moment. Night shifts, there's huge amounts of studies on women particularly who do night shifts, much more prone to being obese, having insulin resistance, and also having fertility problems, because it can then disrupt the estrogen and the prolactin and luteinizing hormone. Endocrine disruptors, because of course they interfere with the estrogen receptors, and estrogen of course plays a role in the master clock. Hormone changes through the month, and of course when you have low estrogen, So I'm thinking here PCOS, menopause, that could have an impact. And so the impacts are being now widely studied. And I've listed a few studies on this webinar just to highlight, but honestly, there are so many. But what they have shown is that circadian rhythm disruption has been linked to a wide range of brain conditions. So that could be mood disorders, immune issues, fertility issues, insulin, diabetes, metabolic syndrome, cardiovascular health, and so on. Women, interestingly, appear more susceptible to having disruptions than men, and that may well be because we have a 28-day cycle. And the estrogen changes are going to influence the suprachiasmatic nucleus. Now, what's interesting is that one study, and I mentioned this earlier, that found that women have a shorter intrinsic circadian period and are more likely than men to have days where it is shorter than 24 hours. Now, it might be about 5 or 6 minutes, but the conclusion of this study was that is actually significant, because what it means is it can have quite an impact on melatonin secretion. Now, whether or not it has a long-term effect is not known, and that was not really the conclusion. What they were saying was that at certain times in your cycle, you may feel that your sleep is more disrupted than others. It was certainly not saying, as a result of that, you need to do something different. It was really highlighting that you need to reset your circadian rhythm daily, and we'll talk about how we can do that. So it can be very significant on how you feel, but also sleep quality as well. And again, looking at our hormonal cycle, the studies have shown that there are particular differences around the mid-follicular and mid-luteal phases. Body temperature goes up in the luteal phase, and melatonin and cortisol may be a little bit more blunted. So you might not necessarily be producing melatonin as quickly or at the, in terms of the deep sleep, as profoundly as you would at other times. So what they showed was that subjectively women felt their sleep quality was poor around their period, but when they looked at the whole of the 28 days, actually the timing and composition of sleep remained fairly stable. So I think there's a difference in your subjective sleep quality and what is really happening. But certainly it may well mean that the slow wave sleep around your period may be disrupted, because that's your deep sleep. And again, I've mentioned shift working, really quite profound effect on fertility, and there's a whole range of reasons. One, it disrupts luteinizing hormone, but also there are other implications. So there's a greater risk of insulin issues, PCOS issues, and so on. And again, falling levels around the menopause and including perimenopause, where it's going to fluctuate a lot more, may well impact the sleep problems. And that's not the only reason why women will struggle to sleep around menopause. There's a whole load of other reasons, often linked to things like the link between estrogen and serotonin and how it affects the serotonin receptors. And of course, serotonin then affects mood, but also serotonin is made or converted into melatonin, of course. But I think what's coming out of the research on the hormones is that there may be certain times in your cycle where your sleep quality is less, and that is when you need to be constantly thinking about resetting the circadian rhythm. There is no evidence that you should change things as a consequence in terms of your sleep cycle. It may be that you need to give yourself a little bit of a break and give yourself permission that, at certain times of your cycle, pushing yourself really hard may not be a good thing, but you should certainly stick to your sleep-wake cycle. That's quite clear from the research. And this was interesting because this was just 8 days of circadian rhythm disruption. So if you think about it, that could be, maybe you've had an infection or inflammation, which has kept you up and you've had a disturbed sleep. Maybe, you are really adversely affected by your period, whether that's pain or anything else. Maybe you've been traveling. 8 days is not a lot to have a circadian rhythm disruption. And this has shown that just over those 8 days, you're having decreased leptin. So this is influencing your appetite and cravings and overeating. Your glucose is going up, your insulin is going up, your cortisol's all over the place. And what that means by flipped daily cortisol is it means that your cortisol is starting to go quite high at night when it shouldn't be, and that blocks melatonin. It then also increased your blood pressure and, of course, unsurprisingly, affected sleep quality. So it doesn't take many days to have quite a significant effect on your health. And the other thing we know it affects is your metabolism. Now, this is really relevant to you achieving the body composition that you want and, of course, maintaining energy levels through the day. So it's no surprise that a circadian rhythm disruption affects obesity and weight gain. And what seems to happen is that the clock genes control the NAD SERT pathway. Now, what this does, and we talked about this in the mitochondrial webinar, this affects the functioning of your mitochondria. And therefore, you're going to feel fatigued. But also, it affects the autophagy, i.e. the cell regeneration and clearance, which of course is really valuable for lowering inflammation and healthy aging. So again, real issues there that could affect your energy, weight, and overall long-term aging. Now, the other area of research is what your gut's doing to your circadian rhythm. Because what they found is that our individual beneficial bacteria, well, all the bacteria actually have their own clocks. And these help to keep all the other organs beating together. So they actually, just like the suprachiasmatic nucleus, are influencing the other clocks as well. And what they've shown is that there are different bacteria that become more abundant at different times of the day. I mean, that's incredible because what we know is that there are different bacteria that produce different, what we call chemicals or metabolites, and they can influence things like glucose that signal to the liver. They can also produce melatonin that actually improves your sleep. So, of course, getting your gut flora healthy is crucial if you are really struggling with circadian rhythm. And of course, the gut and the brain are very much always talking to each other. So what happens in the gut can influence your mood, can influence inflammation in the brain, and it can influence, of course, melatonin and other neurotransmitter productions. So it can affect everything. So what we eat, keeping our gut healthy is going to be absolutely critical. And what they have shown is that if there is also a disruption in your circadian rhythm, so say, for example, you've had some interrupted night's sleep, the child's kept you awake or whatever, that in itself then changes your gut microbiome. That then has a knock-on effect to your circadian rhythm. So you've got this two-way street of changes going on, and your bacteria change. So the balance of your bacteria changes. It becomes more inflammatory. There is a decrease in something called butyrate. Now that's a short chain fatty acid, and that has been shown to lower inflammation in the brain. And they're now doing studies on butyrate and things like Alzheimer's, as well as mood. So you can see that long term, this could have quite profound effects. And they also influence your melatonin production. So again, another way that changes in our gut flora can actually influence your sleep quality as well. And then we've talked about hormonal changes in our gut in the past. So another whammy on this is, say you are entering the menopause or you're having severe sort of ups and downs in estrogen in particular, That in itself affects your gut flora. So we've got another contributing factor here. Changes in your endocrine, changes in your hormones, then affect your microbiome. Not only that, it affects things like your gut motility. So I don't know if women have noticed that as they enter the menopause, they're much more likely to get constipated. And that's because estrogen levels are starting to really dip. Now, if you are more constipated, you often will have gut bacteria fermenting food that is not really shifting in the gut. And that makes you more prone to infections, dysbiosis, IBS, inflammation, gut problems, food sensitivities, the whole works. So there's a whole knock-on effect as to how estrogen then affects the gut, which can then affect your circadian rhythm and so on. So one of the areas that we know that people need to really be thinking about is, well, is my gut actually that healthy? Do I eat sufficient plant-based starchy veg to keep the beneficial bacteria healthy? And that could be beans and pulses, chia, flax seeds. Obviously, if you've got dysbiosis and you start eating a load of beans and pulses, you might actually feel worse. So you need to really sort out, have I got some gut imbalances that need sorting out? And if you have, then stool testing is probably the way to go. You could try an antimicrobial to see if that helps. Probiotics can be very beneficial. And for some people, short-chain fatty acids really useful as well. And then I've talked about hormone fluctuations and rhythms. Well, we know that because low estrogen can shift our circadian rhythm, this is also relevant if you suffer with PCOS. So it's not just about, perimenopause, menopause, and of course our monthly cycles. Often for PCOS, their levels of estrogen are much lower compared to, say, testosterone, for example. And then, of course, that can have a knock-on effect to insulin. Inflammation levels can be higher. So we want to get our circadian rhythm back into beat. And for PCOS or metabolic syndrome generally, where insulin is often a little bit out of whack, as in your cells are not responding to insulin, one of the things that can help get it back into sync is to get the circadian rhythm back into sync. And when you improve your circadian rhythm, you're going to lower your cortisol and you'll get your cortisol back into sync. And that can help with things like anxiety, feeling overwhelmed, and also cognitive function as well. Now we've got these things called Zeitgebers, and this is a German word, so apologize for my pronunciation there, for time givers. These are signals that we can use to get our circadian clock back into sync. So these are effectively biological clues, or environmental clues rather, that will resync our, particularly the suprachiasmatic nucleus, back into our 24-hour light-dark cycle. And you want a strong circadian rhythm because that is good for higher quality of life, more energy, better brain function, and so on. So we know how important it is. And the most important biological clue is light, because that is, without a doubt, the first thing that anyone should be doing if they're thinking that their sleep pattern is out of sync. Lack of light will not only decrease your mood and energy, but if you have it at the wrong time, it will impact your sleep. So it's sunlight and the intensity and the duration that's really important. Blue light, which is what we get from electronics, phones, everything else, TV, is very stimulatory. Fine during the day, but at night time, that's going to keep you awake. So what we want to try and do is get outside as early as we can in the day, so early in the morning, get outside, bright light, get yourself exposed to light, and then you need to start reducing light intensity late afternoon, evening. And that might mean, using red glasses or these UVEX glasses to block out some of that, harmful blue light. Turning off artificial lighting and using orange bulbs has been shown to help. And there's something called the F.Lux program. Now, you can download this for free on your computer and it blocks out the blue light. And what it does is it makes your computer screen look like the room that you're in all the time. So in the daylight, it will be brighter. In the evening, it will go darker. And that's quite an effective thing to do if you don't want to invest in red glasses. And then, of course, you need that bedroom really dark. So blackout blinds, no lights on the electronics that you might have in the bedroom. But certainly getting outside first thing in the morning is one of the best things you can do to reset your daily rhythm. Even if you don't feel like it, just go out in your garden or the street and just get yourself exposed. For other people, they use clocks or lamps, dawn stimulators, bright light devices if you're not able to get out in the morning. And those can be really effective. I've mentioned in the past that you can download lux meters on your phone and find out where in your rooms, in your house or flat, you have the most light. And it's really good idea to work there so that when you are working, you're getting as much exposure as possible. Now, of course, we know that melatonin and light exposure is more difficult at this time of day. And so, what you want to try and do is really make an effort in winter to be really making sure you get enough bright light. So we know that, there's been a number of studies where they've shown that melatonin is much more easily suppressed in the winter than in the summer. Of course, that makes a lot of sense. So work in bright light areas, get outside. Now, light and water intake is an interesting one. So vasopressin, which is expressed in the brain, the blood, the retinal cells, is also very reactive to light cues. Now, what's interesting about this is that it controls multiple mechanisms to do with water intake and fluid retention. So changes in vasopressin through the day may well mean that you get this feeling of wanting to drink loads of water before bedtime. But you need to try and avoid that at night and get lots of light in your eyes in the morning, but not at night. And that may help to re-regulate your water intake. And it may then help with having to go to the toilet all the time at night. So a lot of that is to do with drinking more in the day, but exposing yourself to bright light because that's going to affect the vasopressin. And then exercise. So our exercise itself is a really good biological clue. And what the studies have shown, they're a little bit mixed, but they really indicate that you should exercise at the same time every day. So if you're someone who does lots of different classes at different times of the day, from day to day, that's probably not a good thing. If you're an early birder, you'll probably feel much better exercising first thing in the morning. Night owl types may want to exercise later in the day, but no later than 5 p.m. If you exercise late at night, it keeps you awake because it's stimulating cortisol and adrenaline, and that will block melatonin. Now, what's interesting is that melatonin itself plays a big role in the timing of exercise. If you are an anxious type, you might want to exercise in the morning because when you do that, it actually stimulates the parasympathetic nervous system. That's your more calm, resting type of nervous response. So good for anxious people. In the evening, the exercise will activate more sympathetic, so get up and go, which is why you don't want to be doing it too late. And then the other good thing that we can do is look at our timing of eating. So food intake has been shown to cause massive disruptions of our circadian rhythm, but also things like body temperature and even immune health and inflammation. So you need to try and eat dinner early. Nighttime eating is really not a good thing. It's associated with metabolic syndrome, which is to do with insulin problems, obesity, as well as a number of other health problems, and including gut issues as well. Now, if you are really struggling to keep yourself, from feeling famished, then a small snack is unlikely to be harmful, but I would try and eat, have that as early as you can. Try and eat at the same time every day. Try and eliminate lots of snacking. So you're better off eating fewer but larger meals. And again, more protein in the morning, because protein can jumpstart your metabolic rate and helps you feel more awake. Try and do the 12 hours at least of overnight eating. For some people, if they really feel their circadian rhythm is out of sync, they're better off actually doing 16/8 for a while. And periodic fasting, like the fasting mimicking diet, can also be really useful to reset the circadian rhythm. Now, what we know is that diets high in fat and sugar have been shown to adversely affect your circadian clock function. Now, it doesn't mean you shouldn't eat any fat at all, but just be mindful that that in itself can cause a shift. You're probably better off with more of the fiber-rich foods as long as you're getting enough protein. Now, they've also shown that you need sufficient selenium. So that could be just that you aim to include a few Brazil nuts, for example. That has been shown to be important for the whole of the methylation cycle, which will then help with serotonin and melatonin. Interestingly, vitamin A deficiency has been shown to be linked to problems with the circadian rhythm and also the methylation B vitamins like methylfolate, B6 and B12. So again, there's a few nutrients that might just help re-regulate your circadian rhythm. Now, watch your stimulants. Now, what's really interesting is coffee is quite an interesting one. There are a lot of mechanisms by how it can affect your circadian rhythm. Now, it can be used to actually entrain and retrain your circadian rhythm if you take it at the right time. And the best time is to have it a few hours after you get up. What you do want to avoid is sugar imbalances. So you need to make sure that you're eating at regular times through the day with sufficient protein, because that in itself can cause dysregulation. And another one is inflammation, particularly histamine. Histamine is actually a neurotransmitter we all produce, and we need it for good cognitive function, but too much is not a great thing. And if you've got inflammation, you've got a gut issue, you've got an allergy, and that could be an environmental allergy like pollen, or it could be food allergies. If you're very stressed, these can all influence histamine. And higher levels of histamine in the morning and day have actually been shown to improve your cognition, while reducing it at night helps you sleep. And histamine is quite a complicated one because there are lots of different types of receptors that we have for histamine. For example, if you've got issues with histamine on your H1 and H2 receptors, you're likely to have rashes, allergies, and have histamine intolerance. Whereas if you have high histamine on the H3 receptors, you'll probably have better cognition. So the key thing is you want to do whatever you can to lower it in the evening. And that is why some people temporarily will find that taking Piriton at night really does help them sleep. But it could be that you take something more natural, like more vitamin C and quercetin in the evenings to try and keep the levels down, for example. Now, stress can also have an impact. And this, it's worth mentioning that, if you're on steroids, that can throw cortisol out a bit as well. And of course, being under constant stress will shift your circadian rhythm. So you want to stress yourself, as in exercise, get sunlight and so on during the day, but you certainly want to try and involve more relaxation techniques to unwind in the evening, because cortisol itself will impact your sleep through melatonin. So just finally, I just wanted to go over sleep patterns, because we've had a few questions about that. There are two major, what we call stages or types of sleep. We have what's called the non-rapid eye movement and the rapid eye movement, or REM cycle. And the rapid eye movement is really characterized by when you have your dreams. So most of your dreams occur during the REM sleep. And studies suggest that a healthy person's normal night of sleep will have about 4 or 5 cycles of REM. So what we do is we move between REM and the deeper sleep throughout our sleep duration. And the release of certain neurotransmitters, like things like histamine and norepinephrine, which is related to stress, is completely shut down in REM. And that is what paralyzes our muscles, and that stops us effectively from acting out our dreams. Now, they've shown that REM sleep is very important for children in terms of their neurodevelopment. But most of our night sleep is actually spent in what we call the non-rapid eye movement pattern. And there are 4 key stages to this, and the body will go through these stages until it gets to stage 3 and 4. Stage 3 and 4 are the most important. So stage 1 is your light sleep, then we move into stage 2, and then 3 and 4 is where we have what's called the slow wave sleep. So we have more of these delta brain waves. And this is a really important part of our sleep for restoration, for quality of sleep. We need to be getting into that slow wave sleep. One of the things that can help with that is our levels of a neurotransmitter called adenosine. And this also acts itself as a biological cue for our circadian rhythm. But it builds up through the day. And when we have enough of it, that's when we start to feel tired. And what it does is it gradually attaches onto receptors, causes our muscles to relax, makes us actually feel very tired. And that's why often, late afternoon, you might start feeling quite tired. And if we can affect that pathway and those mechanisms, we can actually help not only improve our sleep, but also help to retrain our circadian rhythm. So caffeine and stress, for example, is a great way of improving it, lowering it in the morning. That's another reason why you don't want lots of caffeine late at night. Adenosine needs to be active enough to get you into that restorative sleep. So if you feel you are not getting quality deep sleep, it may be because your adenosine levels are too low. Now, we don't want excessive levels because, interestingly, that has been linked to ongoing fatigue. So, again, this is an indication. If you are feeling very fatigued most of the time, is it that your circadian rhythm needs retraining? And they've also shown that excessive levels have actually been linked to certain cancers and Parkinson's disease. So you want sufficient levels at the right time. Now, what can affect your adenosine? High-fat ketogenic diet will increase your levels. So even though we said that fat can interfere with the circadian rhythm, there may be people who find that it can improve their levels through the evening. What I would say is that you don't want a lot of fat in the evening if you know that you get digestive upsets and gastric reflux, because fat takes a lot longer to digest. But you could try something like MCT oil, for example. Now, caffeine blocks adenosine, which is why it's a good idea to have it in the morning. But what it does is there are lots of receptors for adenosine. It gets quite complicated, but too much caffeine, because it only affects one particular receptor, could make you anxious. There is a herb called Java herb, which you can get as a supplement. Now, what that does is it also blocks A1 as well as A2. So it can enhance your cognition, but not trigger the anxiety. So there are some different stimulants you could try. Yerba mate is another one as well. Now, alcohol is an interesting one because a lot of people find that it makes them feel sleepy. It does, but what it does do is, while it increases adenosine, so makes you sleepy, it also enhances its breakdown. And that's why you will often find you wake up when you've had a glass of alcohol, or that you don't feel you're getting that deep sleep. So really be mindful of the effect alcohol can have on slow wave sleep. It's a really fascinating area, adenosine. And if we can manipulate it, we can actually improve our sleep quality. So caffeine in the morning, sunlight, exercise, all in the morning can be really useful. And there's 3 supplements that you might want to try for adenosine. Berberine, and you would take berberine through the day. So you take berberine with food. Be mindful, berberine can have an effect on blood glucose, so be careful if you're on a medication that also affects your blood glucose. Curcumin and cordyceps. And the reason I mentioned cordycepin is that's the active component in cordyceps, which is a mushroom. So when you're looking at buying a supplement, just check it's stating how much of the active component it is. But with something like curcumin and cordycepin, you might want to be taking these in the afternoon to increase the levels of adenosine. Now, general hacks for your circadian rhythm. Cold shower first thing in the morning, really good way of really resetting it. Morning sunlight, exercise in the morning, protein and fats in the morning, coffee 1 to 3 hours after waking. All of these can be really good in the morning. In the evening, you want a slightly higher carb-rich food. That doesn't mean loads and loads of bread. It just means more starches, sweet potato, bit of rice, etc. Don't eat late in the evening. Block out your blue light. Warm bath. So what we know is that to trigger sleep, it's a good idea to have a drop in temperature. So a warm bath or a hot shower about an hour before you go to bed can be a really effective way of helping sleep. Glycine, 3 grams, is very effective. Again, about an hour before you go to bed, and just make sure your bedroom is actually nice and cool. Now, we have done a whole webinar on sleep, so I'm not going into it now, but obviously I'll open it up to questions now. But I've just listed here some of the key supplements that I find help people the most. There are so many. If you look at the research, there's so many you could try. Your choice will depend on medication, your health history, and what your particular concerns are. One of the ones, I'm going to be really honest, that I've just ordered it for Nathan, who's struggling a bit with sleep just because he's quite anxious, is Uridine. And Uridine influences receptors in the brain that can help with calming the mind and improving sleep. A lot of people find this is almost their last resort supplement. So I'm going to try this one. I will feed back when it finally arrives and let you know. If someone is quite wired at night, phosphatidylserine can be very useful, because what that does is it blunts the cortisol spike. Glycine, for a lot of people, helps them feel quite relaxed. Theanine, very good again if you're feeling quite anxious. So there's a whole number there. Some of them will work better for others. And, you know, again, if you've got tips of supplements that you have tried that you think work for you, then do put them in the box, because it's really good to share. But I find everyone is very, very different. With Nathan, I'm going to try the phosphatidylcholine and the Uridine together, because the acetylcholine pathway can help the vagus nerve and the body to relax. And I think that's part of his problem. He's already trying magnesium glycinate and some of the others, and while they may help, they're not helping enough. So I will feed back on those 2. They should be arriving in the next couple of days, so I'll let you know. But let's open it up for questions. I will just get my camera on. Chris is here. So if you've got any questions, just type them in and Chris will read them out.
Great, thanks everyone. Loads of questions coming through, which is always good. And just some general comments as well.
Yep.
So just about the exercise and
I'm just going to move
and eating, etc.
Yeah.
Jennifer says she's really pleased to hear about the exercising, that she's always done by 9.
So am I.
I've just got a question about that. You talked about moderate exercise.
Yeah.
Is there a danger you overdo it first thing in the morning?
No, I mean, it's not to do with the intensity of the exercise. If anything, you're better off doing HIIT training first thing in the morning if you feel up to it. Obviously, make sure you've warmed up, etc., etc., because that's going to stimulate much more cortisol. You know, if you're going for a slow walk later in the day, that's unlikely to have too much of an effect on the melatonin cortisol link. So it's the intensity of the exercise. You're better off doing the intense exercise first thing in the morning.
Cool, great, thank you. And question as well, there's more of a comment from Jill. She goes, wow, when you think of the Spanish, and that's her side of the family, all eating at midnight, presumably that's not good.
Yeah, I mean, very interesting, isn't it? And, you know, I'd be interested to see what their gut flora is like. But of course, I suppose it may well be that their circadian rhythm is out in the sense that the 24-hour light dark cycle is probably out. But they probably, I mean, they don't normally start working till much later. So it is out in terms of how we, you know, we are animals that respond to light and dark, and we really should be a bit like our ancestors, responding to the light and the dark. So their whole 24-hour clock is probably out because they get up slightly later and they work later as well. So interesting one.
Great, thank you. Helen's asked a question about drinking late at night. Not alcohol, but is having cocoa just before you go to bed, it does have some calories in it, so she presumes it gets the pancreas working, but it's not food.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think it's when you eat. I think if, you know, I mean, there's no definitive cutoff. That's the problem. There's no research to say you must stop at 8 o'clock at night. But I would suggest that, you know, a warm drink. I mean, some people have actually found, and this is, you know, been sort of cited by a lot of people, and I do encourage this for some clients, if they are really struggling with blood glucose, or they're getting overly hungry at night, then something like, you know, a glass of cherry active, warm glass of cherry active, warm milk or dairy alternative with a teaspoon of honey can actually improve their sleep. And one of the reasons seems to be due to just stabilizing blood glucose. So you don't want to be starving. And one of the other things they've shown about adenosine is that if you don't eat enough through the whole day, you will not build up the adenosine, and therefore you won't get that quality sleep. So the same thing sort of happens. So I would look at it as it's probably okay if you don't feel that it's causing you, because it's got a little bit of stimulant in there, cocoa. The milk's great in the sense of the, you know, tryptophan pathway, but if it's got a lot of caffeine in, that could, for sensitive people, affect them. So I wouldn't be worried about, you know, a warm milky drink or a cherry active at 8 o'clock or something like that. I think that, if anything, could be useful. The key thing is to look back. Have you eaten enough through the day to build up the adenosine?
Thank you. Karen's asked a question, is IF detrimental to the circadian rhythm?
No, if you are structured with it, so if you do it on a regular basis, then that is your sort of pattern of eating. It's a bit like, you know, the eating patterns might be slightly different from one person to another, but the fact that they are consistent with those is what's really important to retrain the circadian rhythm. So, you know, some people might eat their evening meal at 5, some people might eat it at 6, some people might eat it at 7. What's more important is the consistency. And actually, you know, if you feel that you've had, say you don't normally do intermittent fasting, but your circadian rhythm is completely out, you may actually find doing intermittent fasting for a week could actually retrain your circadian rhythm back into sync.
Great, thank you. Karen's asked a question, does the hormone cycle still continue well into and after menopause?
That's a difficult one. It's not in the sense that you're suddenly producing lots of estrogen, because if you think about it, at menopause, your whole production at the ovaries is shut down. But you will still have Cycles of things like the cortisol, which can affect hormonal signaling and so on throughout the whole of your day. What's interesting is some people do feel that they're still having a sort of cycle, even though they're menopausal, if that makes sense. But strictly speaking, you wouldn't see a fluctuation. You know, if I blood test someone, they wouldn't have a fluctuation in their blood levels of estrogen.
Cool, thank you. Nate has asked the question. She always takes probiotics at night.
Yeah.
Is that best?
Yeah.
Just wondering if it's better, if there's a better time of day.
No, I don't think. I mean, a lot of people. I say to a lot of people, take it in the evening, but that's mainly because they might be taking an antimicrobial or something during the rest of the day, and we need a space to stick it so that it's away from an antimicrobial. And some people also will swill probiotic in their mouth as part of their dental hygiene regime in the evening. So absolutely fine. I mean, the only time I'd say it might not be good is if you were taking a really mega dose like VSL and you've had in the past a lot of gut dysbiosis. It could temporarily, at the beginning of you taking it, cause a shift in your bacteria, which may make you feel quite bloated. But if you're regularly taking a probiotic and you don't really have any gut issues, then it's probably a very good thing.
Great. Helen's asked a question, would it be better to have a different light bulb on a bedside table for pre-bedtime reading? Presumably she's got one that's quite light at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, you can get what's called these orange bulbs, which are lower light emitting in terms of the blue light. So yes, absolutely. You know, and the more you try and restrict that quite abrasive blue light, which blocks the melatonin in the bedroom, the better, and in the evening generally. So yeah, absolutely, good idea.
Thank you. Karen Ryan has asked a question. If it's dull early in the morning, would it be better to wait till later and hope for sunlight? Good luck in this weather, though.
I mean, ideally, because the whole of the suprachiasmatic nucleus is switching itself on and it's releasing things like cortisol in the morning, serotonin goes up, estrogen goes up in the morning. You know, the earlier you can do it, the better. I know what you're saying. I would say what you don't want to be doing is doing it at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Not that at the moment it's that bright. I mean, it's okay. You want to be doing it around, say, you know, 11, 12, 1. That would be a good time to do it. So yeah, if you want to delay your morning walk until lunchtime, fine, but still get yourself exposed, whether it's in a window or your working environment, as early as you can with sunlight.
Okay, Jennifer's just replied to that, and she's heard that the Lux is better as outdoor, even if it's dull, compared with indoor light.
Oh, absolutely it is. Yeah, I mean, if you can get yourself outdoors, and I know, you know, it's been absolutely freezing, then it is better, without a doubt. But, you know, for some people, it's not possible, and some people are not even well enough to do that. So you can buy these lights, these sort of waking up lights, which can be very effective and very useful for people that really struggle with SAD, for example, in the winter.
Great, thank you. And just a few comments about that. People saying walk in the morning is really good. People do it before virtual school, etc. Other people saying they could just hibernate in the winter.
Yeah,
as soon as you get dusk, people crash, which is fair enough.
And also, I think because, you know, you probably are feeling more sleepy, the adenosine is going up, motivation goes down. So it's all very well saying, oh, I'll do it in the evening. Chances are you probably won't. But also, if you think about it, if you go for a walk in the evening and you're in a quite built-up area and there's loads of light, then it's probably actually having the reverse effect. It's not calming you down. If anything, it's too stimulatory.
Thank you. Does exercise late at night include yoga?
No, probably not, because a lot of people use yoga to tap into the parasympathetic nervous system. I mean, it does depend on the type of yoga you're doing, of course. But if you're doing it as a way of relaxing, meditating, focusing, keeping the body calm, then it's probably a good thing.
a question about when to have your first coffee in the morning.
Yeah.
Karina's asked this. She said she has a coffee, a couple of shots with some oat milk first thing after a glass of water. Really helps her waking up.
Yeah, fine.
Is that fine? She shouldn't perhaps wait a couple of hours before she has that?
No, I mean, almost the earlier the better. You know, unless, of course, you're doing a sort of time-restricted eating. You know, if you are doing a sort of 16-8, you can still have your coffee, just have it black. Otherwise, you're not really fasting. But that's, you know, potentially doing it for a different reason. But no, first thing, yeah, good idea.
Right, okay. There's a few questions then about sort of things that people are taking to help them sleep.
Oh, good.
Sominex, is it okay to have occasionally?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Because, I mean, you know, for a lot of people, again, things like the Piriton and Nitol and things, if you've had, you know, 5 nights of absolute rubbish sleep, you need to get sleep. The key is not to get dependent on them and not to feel that you have to have them. You know, sleeping tablets, I mean, I'm talking pharmaceutical here, are inherently very difficult to get back off. And actually, for a lot of people, they end up feeling quite drowsy for a lot of the day as well. But, you know, short term, to get you back to get some quality sleep so you feel human again, absolutely fine.
Great. Karen's asked a question. She can't take antihistamines 2 days running. One day helps, second one doesn't. Is there a connection between the two?
And that's interesting because with some of the supplements that I mentioned, a lot of people, and I don't mean an antihistamine is a supplement, but with what a lot of people find is they have to cycle things. And it's almost like it's too strong or too overactive. Or if you think about it, the receptor cells may be not responding because they're getting too used to something. So I would say, I mean, well done that you've noticed that. I would say cycle them. So some days have it, some days don't.
Great, thank you.
And sorry, I would say that as well for quite a lot of generally supplements to do with sleep. It's always a good idea to chop and change them because, again, I mean, I know melatonin is only available officially on prescription in the UK. I mean, it doesn't stop an individual getting it. But again, I think with melatonin even, having a break, you know, from time to time with some of those can be a much more effective way of then getting a better sleep.
What about sleep trackers? Some people got Fitbits.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I have a Fitbit, and I never look at the sleep because I sort of go on how I feel. You know, do I feel like I've had a good night's sleep? I don't know how reliable they are. There's a lot of criticism in some of the research that they're not that reliable. But if they're useful for you, and you know, you want to maybe track your cycle and your sleep as part of that, then, you know, go for it. I just wouldn't get over anxious about it because that might have a detriment effect in itself.
What about sleep apnea? Does that break up sleep?
Sleep apnea is terrible for sleep quality. I mean, without a doubt. And that's one of the reasons why sleep apnea has been associated with so many health conditions. And it's a bit of a vicious circle because sleep apnea is often associated with obesity and blood sugar imbalances in diabetics, but equally lack of quality sleep. So what sleep apnea often does is stop you going into that slow wave sleep. You're not going to get that restorative sleep. So yeah, it's a big issue, and that's why there's a lot of research now onto sleep apnea and all the health conditions, and that includes long-term cognitive health issues. So it's a really important one to address.
Okay. Is it possible to test adenosine levels?
Not to my knowledge, no, because if you think about it, it's fluctuating throughout the day. So it would be very difficult to know what is the optimum for that individual at a particular time of day. But what I would suggest is that if you feel slow wave sleep in particular is poor, then you might want to consider looking at supplements that might help with adenosine, but also those things like the caffeine, the exercise and the light first thing in the morning, because that can help. Look as well at the spanning of your eating patterns and maybe increase a little bit more carb and a little bit more easy to digest fat in the evening, such as MCT oil, which you can buy as a liquid and you just pour it into, say, a smoothie or something.
Great. So there's a few questions about different supplements now, or different things helping people sleep. Daniela's made a comment that she uses something called AOR, which contains melatonin. She's got it in the States, but I think
I know you've mentioned that one to me, and obviously it's not legal in the UK. Not saying that you're doing anything wrong, because it's absolutely fine for an individual, but obviously a company is not allowed to sell that in the UK.
Okay. But just general comments about it. I know, obviously, you can get it on prescription, I think, is what Daniela was saying.
Well, you can get melatonin on prescription, and I'll be honest with you, in the States they use it all the time, and I think it's so much safer than a sleeping tablet. And I have a couple of clients who have particular health conditions, including a young child with a quite a rare condition, who has got melatonin on prescription, and it is absolutely brilliant for them, without a doubt.
And someone's a bit further down asked about a melatonin in general.
Yeah, you can get it on prescription.
Yes.
I would say if you're new to melatonin, you titrate it. So don't go on a mega dose. And it really depends on your size, your age, and so on. Supplements start from about 1 milligram and go up to about 10 milligrams or even a bit more.
Okay. Which company do you use for Iodine?
I'll have to get back to you, because I actually ordered it on Amazon. I'm going to try 2 different companies, because I can get samples from the other one that I paid much less for. So I'll have to get back to you, and I'm still waiting for it to. I've launched it. I've just had a little whinge to them because, I ordered it in January and I still haven't got it. Anyway, but I'll let you know.
Great, thank you. Susanna's asked about supplements to support children to sleep. Nathan's actually an adult, so
Nathan is 22 now.
22,
I have to think about that. He's just turned 22. But he, I haven't done his genetics. I need to do them, but I think he's a met consnip, and I've talked to him about this. And what that means is he's very good frontal cortex, brilliant. Very good at, getting on with it, focus, all of that. But he does find it hard to wind down, so he's much more of a worrier. And this, of course, like everyone, you worry at night, and you certainly get completely over the top at 2 o'clock in the morning when you can't sleep. And so he's getting this build-up of adrenaline and noradrenaline. And that's what's stopping him from calming down. So that's why for him, I'm choosing things that relax that and support the sort of parasympathetic nervous system. But you can still give children supplements to help them sleep. You just have to watch their weight and titrate the dose down. Easy ones to start off with. Make sure they're getting enough magnesium and zinc. 2 key ones for sleep. So those would be very safe, very easy. And then you can start thinking about other things. But look at the diet, look at Cherry Active, look at Epsom salt bathing and all of that as well.
Right. Jill's asked a question about osteopaths. She said they use cranial sacral for the vagus nerves.
Very good. And chiropractors will. If you get a good chiropractor, I've got brilliant chiropractor. They can also do similar things too. And if you remember, of course, one of the things that can really disrupt sleep is pain. Injuries, pain, that whole inflammatory response. Well, what it will do is it taps into the sympathetic nervous system, which is not your rest and digest and calm down. It's the fight or flight. And that's why I think things like curcumin and fish oil have actually helped a lot of people sleep better.
Right, thank you. Just going back to about the children. Daniela's got a 6-year-old who's very anxious going to sleep.
Oh, God.
Well, she said that she just found routine is really good. Quiet, then reading at night, that type of thing, bath time.
Yeah. Especially at that age. I think that's absolutely spot on.
Cool. Nate has asked a question. Do you eat breakfast after exercising in the morning?
I think it depends on the individual. I don't personally, but I'm probably a bit like Jennifer. I don't know if she's still on. But I'm exercising, it's like 5 in the morning, so I'm not eating at all. I mean, I do take a pre-workout drink which has caffeine in, but no, I don't.
A recommendation from Claire is chestnut bark flower. Remedy
Yeah.
a very good cup of drops if you've got quite a busy mind for a go to bed and if you wake up during the night.
That's a good one. Thank you for that.
Cool. Preeti has asked a question. What is the effect of decaf organic coffee in the afternoons, please?
Yeah, that should be fine because it's the caffeine that's the stimulant here, and that's what will block the adenosine receptors. Decaf should be okay. I mean, it might contain traces, and if you're very, very sensitive, that might be an issue. But from a stimulatory point of view, it should be fine.
Right. Mandy, she says, if sleep is disturbed during the night, is it okay to have a power nap during the afternoon if feeling very tired, or is that presumably, I think the inference is, will that then disturb your sleep?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And the answer is, and there's a couple of really good sleep experts, and they say no. And they say it's absolutely fine to have 15 to 20 minutes power nap, and that should be fine. What they do suggest is you don't do it, say, 5 or 6 o'clock in the evening. You do it, say, 3 o'clock. But no, there's a couple of really good sleep experts. There's one, can't remember his name, but he works a lot with athletes who have to do a lot of, traveling, and he worked a lot with the Tour de France and their sleep patterns all over the place. And so he would actually say, no, it's absolutely fine to do a power nap as long as you don't do it too long. So you set your clock and you make sure you wake up after about 20 minutes or so, and you don't do it too late.
Great, thank you. And Nate has just made a recommendation that you can buy light bulbs which have different colours on a remote control.
Brilliant.
She got hers at Tesco.
Brilliant.
Isaac's actually got some that.
Yeah, Isaac's got some upstairs.
Google Assist, so you can actually talk to them and tell them what colour to turn on.
Isaac is a bit of our computer geek, so he's got light bulbs, different colours, and he tells Google Assist to switch them on and off. Why he can't do it himself, I don't know, but anyway.
They're great.
Yeah.
I'm not. Yeah, really
but that's good to know. Tesco is great, fantastic.
Alison says 5 a.m. workout. Wow, did you train yourself to wake up that time? Well, I think it's because you go to bed at 8 o'clock, Christine.
I'm a bit like, so Jennifer and I sort of posted a few comments about our circadian rhythm is very much with the light at the moment. I think it was having twins, actually, that probably did it, because I was having to get up early anyway to breastfeed them. That was 16 years ago. So, I've just kept with that.
Okay. And last question from Samantha. She says she's had to buy Cherry Active in capsules. Will that still have the same effect?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, absolutely. Because the active component is the melatonin. I think the reason I often suggest the drink, I mean, obviously, in a way, the capsules are better in the sense that they don't disrupt your blood sugar. But if you're having issues stabilizing your blood sugar, then actually a cherry active juice, it might sound a little bit contraindicated, but could be very useful. A bit like, and I would recommend you try this with your kids. Teaspoon of honey, ideally local or Manuka honey, in a warm, milky drink. Now it could be, almond milk, coconut milk. Try that about an hour, 2 hours before they go to bed. For a lot of people, it's that stabilizing of the blood glucose. So one of the ways of having a cherry active juice or hot drink can have that similar effect. But of course, if you don't need to do that in terms of, glucose levels, then actually you're not going to get the calories and the sugar hit with the capsules. So for some people, the capsules may actually be better. So I think it will just depend, but you'll still get the melatonin benefit, absolutely.
Great, I think that's all the questions.
Great, thank you everyone. And reminder for those who are on the Glycan menopause trial, we have our Zoom call tomorrow. I will try and record that, so if someone really can't make it, then hopefully I can get you the sort of playback as well. But thank you everyone, And I'll speak to you all very soon. Have a great day, everyone.